Hello, and welcome to Phantom Zoned, the podcast where we dredge the lakes of hell in search of the worst the cinematic world has to offer and put it on trial for its various sins against humanity. Should a film be found guilty, it'll be jettisoned into the far, far, far recesses of space, a Phantom Zone, if you will. I'm your host, Adrian Torres, and joining me, as always, is my fellow cosmonaut, Scott Daly. How's it going, Scott?
I'm doing good, Adrian. I'm really excited about this movie, which is more excitement than the movie deserves because it's the most boring.
You should not be excited.
I like talking about these movies, and the worse they are, the more I like talking about them. So,
for me, I think it depends on the day. I love talking about these movies in general, but there's sometimes that my energy kind of wanes if I had a bad day and the movie is, more of a slog than normal. And this, unfortunately, was one of those. But I think most people would feel that way. I have seen that there was lots of love for it on the internet, so,
That's confusing to me.
That means that there's no accounting for taste.
Yeah, this is not a movie that, we've watched a lot of movies that end up being fun. I will never forget my experience with Elves. I will love that movie for all time. This is not one of those movies. This is it's an abomination.
Basically,
a contamination abomination.
It's a far cry from Snake Eater. That's all I have to say. There's lots of times that I try to cull the movies. So I wanted Scott to have a big say in choosing a movie or two, up and coming, since we just had the three cools, and we wanted to go off into a new avenue. And so I thought having Scott guide us in there would be great, just to spice things up, instead of me just saying, hey, here's a handful of movies, you got to pick your poison. I retaliated last week when he didn't have a movie, and we ended up watching USS Indianapolis, which was very much, I asked him, hey, did you end up deciding a movie? He said no, and I said, fine, we're doing this movie. There's no option.
You punished me with Nick Cage and sharks.
So I was about ready to do the same thing this week when Scott told me I don't have a movie ready. Until he reminded me what's next week. So coming soon, of course, is April 26th, which is 4/26, a day I know quite well because it's actually my birthday. But also at the same time, and more importantly, it's Alien Day because of the planet and Alien and Aliens is LV-426. So with that in mind, we decided that we wanted to cover an Alien ripoff. Naturally, this led to Scott saying, hey, you're probably more versed in this than I am.
That's
true. You choose a couple movies, and then I'll choose from there. So this one, once again, is Scott saying, ooh, that one. And that led us to 1980's Contamination.
I'm sorry. Look, I'm really sorry. It looked good.
I will go on record. I don't know if it's much better. We should watch it sometime, maybe in a couple months, or maybe next month when Alien Covenant comes out, just to do another little ripoff in there. Was the Roger Corman produced Galaxy of Terror?
Yeah, I wanted to do that. We couldn't find it in legal ways.
Yeah, I mean, we can, if worse comes to worse and we can't find a cheap copy, because I know that they do have cheap copies to buy on Amazon. So maybe we'll find one that's like $3 or $4, and get that shipped and get taken care of that way. That one's got the James Cameron connection, so we'll see what we can do. Maybe we'll get that. Unfortunately, no, that's not what we're talking about now. We're talking about Contamination. That's also known as Alien on Earth. That's also known as Alien Contamination. It's an Italian, I guess you'd call it horror film, maybe.
And it's an Italian film where people sit in rooms and talk about things a lot.
Yes. I've got two synopses this week. I watched it on Vudu. Unfortunately, I had to pay for it this time. but that's okay. So the first synopsis is from IMDb. It says a former astronaut helps a government agent and a police detective trace the source of a mysterious alien pod spores filled with lethal flesh-dissolving acid to a South American coffee plantation controlled by alien pod clones.
Now, so you read that synopsis right there, and you say, this is going to be the best movie ever. Because that sounds insane.
It does sound insane. Actually, far more insane is Voodoo's synopsis, which says a deserted ship arrives in New York City carrying its slaughtered crew and a horrific cargo. Mutant green eggs the size of footballs that pulsate with life until they spray hideous chest-bursting death. But when a government research team begins an investigation, they discover a grisly conspiracy of murder, space monsters, and coffee. Who is harvesting these alien hell spores? What is their connection to a doomed mission to Mars? I mean, it does make it sound really exciting, but then there's like a good hour and 15 minutes in between all that stuff.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be a very long episode because just it's an hour. It's a 95-minute movie.
Yes,
but not a lot happens.
No. Nope.
And the stuff that does happen doesn't make a lot of sense.
No. Basically,
I'm still not really clear on any of the plot of this movie. I don't understand the conflict and why it's dangerous and any of these things.
Well, we'll see if we can try to piece this together here. When the movie opens, we get a good 5 to 6 minute segment of shots of New York and a helicopter that's flying around New York City until finally it sees a ship that's coming, I guess, into port, harbor, whatever you want to call it. I don't know where it's trying to go or dock, but it's heading towards New York City, and the helicopter is taking its time going through every procedural step that it would need to make while talking back to HQ. We don't know who these people are with. Like, we don't know if they're supposed to be Coast Guard, but in a helicopter, because they're talking to somebody at like the shipping dock, and the people there are saying, can you see anybody on the ship? Can you check this? Does this look like it's working? Even though they're in a helicopter and there's only so much that they can see from their vantage point.
Yeah, and they also say that the ship is breaking every rule, every regulation in the book by just going fast.
That's against every regulation in the book.
Going fast is against every single regulation in the book.
I don't know. I don't know. We do get some great little pieces in like the actual credits themselves. First of all, I don't know if it's what the band was known as at the time or if they just fucked up. But famous synth soundtrack gods, Goblin, did the soundtrack for this movie, but they are listed as, in quotation marks, the Goblin.
The Goblin.
At the same time, it also mentions in the opening credits, Alien Cyclops designed by, so you know that the movie's at least going to figure, it's going to have an Alien Cyclops.
Feels like something
nothing else.
Feels like something you should put at the end of the end credits.
It's not something you need in the opening credits, and they actually do have quite a long list of end credits, so it's not as if they were just trying to put everything at the front, and that's it. But it just kept, like, this scene kept on going just on and on and on.
Yeah, and it's only serves to tell us one thing, that there's a ship, and the crew is missing, and it's heading towards the dock. But they don't show us, like, board the ship and get into the dock, because this movie obviously was very cheaply made, and so any moment of any kind of thing that costs money, like a ship or a plane, we had to just cut around that.
Well, because it's daytime during the opening credits, and the ship is already in docked and has like police and a whole bunch of other groups around it, and it's nighttime. And they still can continue with this very procedural approach when they have the police detective Tony shows up, and then they've got the guy from the health department, and they're all like, okay, well, we got to get on a protective gear. And you see them go around the corner of the van, and then they've got it on, and they go, okay, we've got on the protective gear. We can now go on to the ship. And they're slowly walking through and describing how everything feels and looks on the ship. And you're like, I don't know who's looking for this amount of detail in a 1980s exploitation film from Italy.
Well, yeah, and that's this is an Italian movie. It's dubbed in English, so naturally the mouths do not sync at all. At first, I thought it was just really bad ADR, and then I was like, "Oh wait, no, they're just not speaking English." But yeah, and like we've got our very familiar beats here, right? Because let's not forget this is meant to be a copy of Alien. So there's a derelict spaceship / ship with a seemingly missing crew, and then they find eggs on it. So that's what we're leaning into this real hard at least at the start of the movie.
Even before they find the eggs, because they're just told that there's green gunk, in which proceeds for them to each say green gunk for whatever reason. They come across the body that's in one of the holds where they mention, oh, it looks like something's exploded from the inside. And as they're moving into the ship, they make sure to show in graphic detail every single person who's been exploded from the chest. So, of course, that's the direct Alien callback that they have. But as they're moving into the ship to find like the green gunk, they come across the eggs, but the eggs are littered in and around a whole bunch of different coffee boxes. And I'm mad that I don't have the clip, and I wish that I did, because when they're talking about the coffee, I literally just wanted to scream and leave the room, because they each start repeating coffee. There's a good 2 minutes in the movie where each person's talking to each other, and they're making sure that they each say coffee in their sentence.
Yeah, that's what this movie does. Like, the dialogue is very like, we have to explain and we have to go through each and every step. Like, characters talk exactly about what they're going to do, and we see the full conversation, including any back and forth questions and stuff like that. It's like, so do you think the rest of the coffee things are filled with these? Yeah, I do think that the rest of the coffee boxes are filled with these eggs. Oh,
but the lettering on this box is different. That's probably their trademark. You're right. That's a good point. It probably is their trademark. That's literally a piece of dialogue from the movie. And I'm just like, what the hell?
Yeah, and it does, like, none of that stuff matters. Like, all that matters is they find an egg and it's hot because it fell under hot pipes.
And so the guy who finds it, who is it? I think it's Tony. It doesn't make sense 2 seconds from now, but he picks up the egg in slow motion.
Yeah. First of all, the egg is like singing. It's like making a really weird noise. And they never mention the noise, which makes me think they completely added that in post and was not planned. Because none of the characters ever point out that it's making this weird pulsing noise.
Well, it even comes back in later in the movie when the bad guy's sitting at the table when it explodes, but the shot is of the guy at the table for like 2 minutes, and you can hear it, and it's like, why isn't he mentioning that he can hear the egg from over here? Who cares? But yeah, Tony picks it up very, very slowly, and because of, I guess, the heat from his hands or from the pipes and it being moved away, causes the egg to explode. It gets some acid on the guy from the health department and causes his chest to explode, as well as the two other gentlemen who are directly across from the health department guy, but not Tony, who was somehow out of the blast zone, even though he picked up the egg.
Okay, so here's point number one, why this doesn't make any sense. So, this doesn't make any sense. So the acid touches them, yes. And then they like immediately explode from their chest. It like touches them on their arm or their face, but it's in just their chest that
they explode
immediately
in slow motion.
Explodes. Yeah.
Yes.
And so they're all dead. But it doesn't. So okay, the eggs, as we see them, never have an creature in them. They are literally just like explodey acid stuff.
But that's not what we're told later.
Yeah, but that's my point. Is it doesn't it doesn't make sense.
Well, it has something to do with the moment that it causes it to explode and causes the liquid to shoot out, causes the creature to become gelatinous. It's something that they mentioned that one of the scientists hypothesizes, which there's a shit ton of hypothesizing and intuition.
Oh, and they make some pretty amazing logical leaps.
But everybody on the ship is dead. They went all explodey, and Tony gets away. Tony ends up getting captured by a government-run research organization that doesn't have a name, has very future-looking sci-fi for 1980s type devices.
Yeah, this looks like they're hanging out in a spaceship.
Yeah, but you never find out like what their direct connection is for anything. Just the fact that they work as some like black ops shadow research organization.
Yeah, but the main character here is the colonel, the woman.
Stella.
Yeah, so
Stella Holmes.
A colonel. Here's where I start really griping on ranks and stuff.
Yes.
A colonel. She said she reported directly to the president. Then she would not be a colonel.
Yes.
And
she has to directly go through the Pentagon to get sanctioned approval for several things that she does.
And also, we find out she was part of the NASA task force that debriefed the astronauts that went to Mars, which would make her an Air Force colonel. Like, I don't understand this.
Well, no, okay. I'm gonna. We'll get to that in a second. It's just lots of this stuff is mentioned at the drop of the hat and then never mentioned again. But the way things are laid out throughout the film, it's not in like the actual order that you should get it. Like people aren't having normal conversations to convey things that have happened to them in this world. You're just given things off the cuff later on, but as if you're supposed to have knowledge for it. Like this feels like a shitty sequel to a movie that was never made.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
But Stella talks in a very weird manner. I mean, she's authoritative, which is awesome, but the way she goes about dictating things just comes out of left field, it seems. When she comes in and she's talking to the detective who's detained behind glass, they have this weird conversation where he calls her baby and she ends up calling him young man, and that she shouldn't call or he shouldn't call her baby. And he gets offended that she called him young man, and so he retorts with babe.
This is it. That part's actually very Italian. And I can say that because I'm Italian, but it's weird.
That's how the conversations normally go?
Yes, that's exactly.
They get him to describe the eggs, even though they have an egg in the other room. And he mentions that the eggs are the size of pumpkins, like footballs.
I mean, maybe like small, weirdly shaped pumpkins.
I don't know how the two of those work. If I'm weighing a pumpkin or I'm comparing something to a pumpkin, I can't compare it to a football at the same time. We get wonderful pieces of dialogue like, I'm in charge of the Caribbean lady case, spoken from Stella.
And there's this whole weird, like, through line where, like, Tony, as a NYPD police officer, is, like, reporting through the colonel, which, again, is not how government organizations work. The NYPD is the city police force. It doesn't make any sense.
Yes. And she gets to say stuff like, call in the special section Squad 2. And she calls out all these assignments, which we don't understand, or I guess really need to understand, because it doesn't come back. But she decides that they are going to try... they've been able to find out the warehouse that this shipment was supposed to go to, so they decide to go there and see what's going on. The reason they decide that they need to go there is that something bad is going to happen. Stella decides this because it's her intuition that tells her.
Yeah, because the sewers, right? She randomly decides.
They're talking about the eggs and the property of the eggs, and and she says, "Oh my God, call it intuition, but I think that they meant to put these in the sewers."
Okay, let me ask you this question though: why would that be a threat? I don't understand the perceived threat of these eggs. Like, you put them in a place that's warm, and they, like, get warm for, like, 5 minutes, and then they explode in their immediate area, and then it's over. Yes. I don't understand.
She also decides that freezing them naturally is the best idea, and then later on decides that even though heat is what causes them to react that way, that taking a flamethrower to them is the only way to kill them.
To be fair, it works for some reason.
When they get to the warehouse, they send one guy up to knock on the door to tell them that they have a warrant, which causes the security guard guy to open the door, talk to the guy, and he goes, "We need to get in. We've got a warrant." The guy says, "Okay," and then just shoots the dude in the forehead.
That was amazing. I love that part.
So the greatest assistant in the entire world, whose name we don't know, but Stella's assistant, who's her right-hand man, gets in his van and decides that he's just going to ram through the front door, which it makes it sound like the door's breaking apart, but the door basically, like, falls straight down when we see the front of his van. But unfortunately, what's happened is the place is already filled with coffee and the green eggs. Not the stuff clearly from the ship, so I'm guessing that they may have had, like, another shipment that was showing up.
Yeah, were they, like, waiting to they just, like, I know this warehouse is completely filled with eggs, but we just need, like, one more shipment before we do our master plan.
And there's 3 dudes at the very end of the warehouse that are guarding everything. And they're being controlled by something, because when Stella and her squad rolls up, these guys take one look at the eggs and decide to shoot the eggs, which causes, of course, the acid to get on them and for them to explode.
Okay, again, one of the eggs was already pulsing. At least one. I think we see multiple of the eggs are pulsing. Mm-hmm. Why? I don't understand these eggs.
Yes. They grab a couple eggs because they wanted to do experiments on full eggs, because the one that they had from the ship earlier was destroyed partially. So they grab full eggs so they can try to kind of incubate them, but keep an eye on them. A scientist lady ends up taking some green fluid from inside of one of the eggs and decides to casually inject it into a rat and then watch it explode, because one thing that exploitation films are known for is for great harm to animals of every kind.
Yeah. And this, again, she had to inject it into its bloodstream for it to work. Adrian, I don't get it. Is it just have to touch you, or does it have to like be in your blood, or what is going on?
Well, no, I mean they're coming up with ideas that aren't really connected to anything else. So like find out how they work, because while they're doing this, they end up having a conversation about the possibility that, of course, these pods aren't from Earth, and that maybe they originally started out as spores that were traveling through sidereal space, and that somehow once those spores hit the atmosphere and they came down, they turned into eggs, and they're having a natural reaction to the chemical makeup of our atmosphere.
Nope, but then Stella comes in with her brilliant intuition again and decides that no, they must be from Mars because they couldn't come from deep space for some reason.
Yeah, she says it doesn't make sense for them to be able to travel on their own, so it would make more sense if somebody who was closer to Earth and had access to bring spores to the planet was the person who was behind it. And that's when she casually mentions that there was a Mars mission and that there were 2 astronauts, one of which ended up going crazy and said that he saw monsters, but then was convinced that it was all hallucinations that he had, and he never actually went to Mars, even though they've referenced that he went to Mars. But she just drops this like 30 minutes into the movie, just casually mentioning, oh yeah, it's when this guy went to Mars. And it's like, whoa, wait. Okay, people in your time have been to Mars, but that's no big thing. I mean, like there's nothing in this world that separates it from regular 1980s New York at any other point.
They also saw football-shaped eggs when they were at Mars, and no one thought to think about that when they found some fucking football-shaped eggs.
But they decide that they need to go talk to Hubbard, who's the astronaut who supposedly went crazy. And when they ended up seeing him, or like finding out where he lives, which he fell off the grid, but of course conveniently, there was a police report from a couple years earlier that had his address, so Tony's able to give that to them. But it turns out that Hubbard is a British man living on like would you say, is that like Upper East Side, Upper West Side?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think they said it was the Bronx, I think.
It didn't look like the Bronx. Maybe it was.
I mean, it probably wasn't, but.
But yeah, he's British and he's in this really shitty apartment. Now, I don't know how they pay their astronauts in there, but if something like this happened and the dude went crazy on a mission like this, I think that they'd have a tighter grip on him. You know, like the government. Like, I don't think you're just going to let a guy go and live in some type of flop house and get drunk all the time and be like, oh, we should probably get a handle on this. He's probably, talking to everybody.
No, Adrian, because he was never there. He never went to Mars.
And that's how he starts talking to Stella by, he's denying everything that happens until Stella ends up showing him pictures that they've taken of the eggs. And he wonders how the hell they got a hold of that. He has a grudge against Stella at first because of the fact that she was on the committee that questioned his sanity when he came back. But this also led him to ask the really weird questioning to her about if she was there to ask about his sexual activities.
I forgot about that.
and he responds, I'll have you know that I can't even get it up, so I'm not even having any. And then she says, I bet you couldn't even get it up if you used a crane.
Why are we being so mean to each other for no reason? She's there to ask for his help.
What the fuck does that comment mean? Is my question. You couldn't even get it up if you used a crane.
Well, clearly, to lift your penis with a crane. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the semantics of the equation. That's my fucking problem. You're right.
But we do get to see a flashback of sorts to Mars, right?
A flashback when Hubbard says, I can't I can't remember it. It was oh so very long ago. And Stella says, try to remember what happened 2 years ago. I think they got different pages of the script.
I'll give the movie credit, though. I don't think we knew that Mars had polar ice caps, had actual ice, until 2004. So they stumbled into accurate science.
Oh, but they make sure to mention that it was the southern polar ice cap that they landed on.
Yeah, you gotta be real specific here.
And they mentioned that they were wandering through ice and fog, not able to see anything until they came upon a mountain of an ice cave.
With a scary
clearly
face.
A body. Yeah, it's not a cave. It's a fucking body because it's got teeth that are jutting out, and the second that they get inside it, it looks like the inside of some creature.
Yeah, it's the space worm from Star Wars.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, except for the inside of it is designed like a very colorful version of the Engineer spacecraft from the actual Aliens films. And you get that feeling even more so because they have the rows of eggs, just like in Alien. But because they can't do it with they can't have the dark look because they don't totally want to get sued. They have
just partially sued.
The eggs be like neon greenish and the walls are orange and red. But that's clearly what they're going for, and they're trying to evoke that feeling. Hubbard's relaying what he remembers happening, and that it was really warm inside, and then all of a sudden there was this glow that started to take over everything. And then he looked at Hamilton, and Hamilton was just staring off. And then he just yells, Hamilton!
That's beautiful. Well done.
Before he's brought back out of the trance from Stella. And she asks if he'd be able to help them, and Hubbard says, that he's broken down and that he's not of use to anybody. So, of course, naturally,
the next scene, he's there.
He's there. But they have a little security council of different members from different armed forces that are watching a video from Hamilton years earlier, where he's, of course, giving the opposite account of what Hubbard saw. And Stella gets another one of her moments where she gets to be an asshole because another member of, I think it was with the Joint Chiefs. They don't really say.
Who knows?
But he mentions, that Hamilton guy, that's the guy that we need to get the help of. And Stella goes, I'm sorry, but I don't have the gift of bringing corpses back to life. Hamilton passed away 3 years ago. I was like, that's the shittiest way to put it to somebody. All you have to say is, unfortunately, he's dead, and we can't help him.
Yeah, stop being an asshole, Stella.
Yeah, the guy didn't say anything to him, and she calls out and says, that she needs another division to get stuff ready because they're going to go on an expedition, and they're going to have. They want Hubbard to go with Tony and Stella to South America to the company that supposedly makes the coffee.
Why is the cop coming? Why is the cop going?
I don't know. Because he's got to fix his hair, man. He spends 20 seconds where he's combing his hair and he's talking to Stella. And then Stella says that she needs him to leave, and he's like, "Oh, okay, I'll leave you two alone because I get it. I understand. I know what's going to happen." And then you get probably one of the most awkward scenes I've seen in a movie. Stella starts basically berating Hubbard, saying that he's not a man and that he's not the hero who decided to go to Mars. And Hubbard's like, "You're right, I'm not that man anymore. I'm not really even a man." And she says, "You need to get it together. You need to become the hero that's truly inside you." And she continues to goad him, until he slaps her the fuck in the face and then stares at her and says, "That's so we just understand one another. Got it?" And she says, "Yes, so we understand one another."
What the fuck does any of this mean?
I don't. It's and then we cut from them to a guy who feels like he's playing a version of Blofeld. Is the only way that I can describe it, because they cut to South America and they've got a blonde lady who's in a weird like smock getup, dressed like a henchman basically, and she has like a telegram to who turns out to be Hamilton, because Hamilton didn't actually die. He's being controlled by the alien. And he gives a little speech to his number one henchman, love lady, we don't really find out. And it feels like it belongs in a really bad Roger Moore James Bond film.
Yeah, I mean, the rest of the movie from this point on feels like just a shitty Bond movie. It really does. Like, the way everyone acts, the way, like, they sneak onto the enemy base and they're taken prisoner and all this bullshit. It turns into a James Bond movie.
But it still takes them another, like, 35 minutes to break onto the actual base, even though they get to South America. Because directly after getting off the plane, we have to see them take in the local flavor. They play, I guess it's supposed to be South American music. I mean, it's nice. It's catchy. I know it's not Goblin. But they have some weird moments where Tony is trying to interact with some local dancers, and it looks like one of them wants to kill him. But it doesn't really add into the rest of the movie.
No.
We get a conversation where they're trying to decide like how they're going to infiltrate the base, while Tony is sitting in a chair and has a tucked in button up shirt, of which only the bottom two buttons are buttoned. It's a terrifying look. So, like, I couldn't think of anything that was going on in the entire scene, because I'm just like, who the fuck is sitting like that and just wearing that outfit? Stella tells both of the guys to leave because she wants to take a shower, which ends up being her telling Tony, and then Hubbard telling Tony, and then Stella telling Hubbard, and then Tony telling Hubbard that she's going to take a shower. To let them know that nobody's getting any.
God, this part of the movie goes on for so long.
We get two more conversations between Tony and Hubbard about the type of woman that Stella is, and how neither one of them would try to get with her, even though Tony wants to try to get with her. Eventually, Stella does get into the shower, and it turns out that we see a gloved individual come into her room and then backs off just as soon as she says, "Who's in here?" And they lock the door, and it turns out that they put one of the eggs in the room and lock the door so that she's not going to be able to get out, so that she'll be killed by the egg. She's trapped in the room for about how long, Scott?
Like 15 minutes. It's absurd. This proves how dumb these eggs are, because it's the stupidest way to kill a person I've ever seen.
It just keeps, like, the scene just keeps going. And they play up the sound of the egg throbbing, and we see a shot of Tony getting ready, and Hubbard is making a phone call. Tony makes a phone call to Stella's room, can't get connected with her. They decide to meet in the hallway for a moment, then walk down to her room and have a conversation about how there's a do not disturb sign on the door, and they thought they were supposed to meet with her. And it's cutting back and forth between this to her screaming in the room, pounding on the door, while there's the throbbing sound that the egg's making.
And she uses instruments to try to pick the lock on the door two
they all
separate
break.
times. She uses one thing, it breaks, and then she starts screaming and giving up, and then she goes back, gets another instrument from her thing. And, like, here's my thing with this. The egg is just sitting on the floor of the bathroom.
Yes.
Get in the shower and close the curtain.
Yeah. Or spray it with, like, cold water is what I was thinking.
Just do something. Like, this is so stupid.
And eventually they're able to break in and get her out of there, and the egg explodes finally when no one else is around. But we don't see it explode right away. We hear it's throbbing, and it cuts to Hamilton, who's eating a meal, and you can hear the egg pulsing while we're watching him eat for a minute until you hear the explosion sound, and he grabs the side of his head because somehow the alien that's controlling him has like a hive mind that's connected to each of the eggs. And when it explodes, he thinks that Stella's dead, but at the same time, he mentions that another one of our creatures has been sacrificed for the cause. So that ties into the weird, anytime these eggs open, it kills whatever creature was inside there and basically liquefies them.
So, do they ever hatch? Because
we never see them hatch.
I don't understand any of this. I don't understand how he knows not only that the egg, like you can get that. Okay, maybe he knows that the egg bursts, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe he's got a psychic link to the alien's got a psychic link to the egg, whatever. But how does he know that the egg didn't kill her? If it was just doing what it was supposed to do the entire time, the reason they put it in there, how does he know? This doesn't make any sense.
No. It's stupid. We get two scenes that are basically cross-cutting. We have Hubbard and a plane because he's supposed to be looking over the fields to see if there's any signs of, I guess, alien activity or if you can see, like, the eggs anywhere. At the same time, we have Tony and Stella going to the coffee factory, which feels kind of like, and I was hoping that things were going to get zany. It felt more in line with, like, Halloween 3. Once they get to the mask factory, that type. But instead, when they go in and they're greeted by a guy to give them a tour, they're greeted by an African-American guy who's dubbed by, like, the whitest Southern guy that you can think of. Like, a white Southern gentleman, like Foghorn Leghorn meets the Colonel. It threw me off. Like, it really threw me off.
Okay, so the movie has decided that the bad guys want the Colonel dead. They want Stella dead.
Yes.
Stella shows up at their coffee factory.
Correct.
And they give her a guided tour of everything. And only at the end of the tour do they then say, we got you. Here's guys with weapons. And then they don't kill her.
No, they threw them in a dungeon where Stella decides to chastise Tony, but is also hitting on him, I think.
Yeah.
Because she says, if only you'd listen to your cop instincts instead of my MIT educated mind.
What a bitch. She's such an ass.
And then he turns to her and he goes, ever since the moment that I've met you, you've thrown me off course. I've never met a woman like you. You're the first woman that I've ever made a hard pass at that I've never made it to first base with. Which is disgusting.
Yes.
And it causes her to turn to him and says, turn to me ever so slightly, to which he does. And she kisses him on the lips, and then he stops and says, that's the most fascinating thing that's ever happened in my life.
Not the exploding eggs or aliens.
No. Hubbard's not having a much better time. he can't find the eggs or anything. His plane starts to have trouble. And instead of it just sending him like crashing to the ground, he makes a slightly bumpy landing.
Yes. And then passes out.
Wakes up, finds a guy who's been shot or something. He mentions the white zombies, and he's able to find people who are dressed in hazmat suits. He's able to get into the base by taking out one of these guys. And while he's doing that is when they finally decide to move Stella and Tony into the bowels of the building, and they're introduced to the alien Cyclops who has been controlling Hamilton since he got back to the planet. Hamilton mentions that originally this alien was a spore in the form of an egg that he brought back with him, and when it hatched, he's been taking care of it since.
What?
Yes.
What?
It's all really, really stupid.
Tell me why is Stella still alive? Why haven't they killed her?
I don't. That part I didn't. I was never able to figure out.
So here's what I actually thought they were going to do.
Okay.
I thought they were keeping her alive to have the alien hypnotize her, and then with her government connections, they could spread the eggs all over the globe. That's what I thought they were going to do, because that would have made like sense.
Yeah. And instead of them asking what the plot was or what their idea was, and Hamilton mentions to them that their goal is to survive. If you think about it for a second, their plan is with the eggs are going to explode and kill the majority of the humans, I guess, so that there are more eggs that are left than there are humans, so that the eggs can hatch and then take over the planet and be the dominant species and use humans as slaves, even though there's going to be untold thousands of alien creatures who are sacrificed in the process.
Yeah, but like
that's basically what they're getting at.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's what it is. But there's the eggs. So first of all, like in Alien, yes, the movie that this is stolen from, it makes sense because the aliens are a parasitic creature that requires a host in order to gestate, and so like they require the people. So this makes sense. So like spreading eggs around the earth would make sense because it requires people. This doesn't make any sense.
No.
Presumably, if no humans interact with the eggs for a long enough time, the egg will just hatch and make more of these weird broccoli monsters that the Cyclops guy is.
I actually like the design of the Cyclops.
I don't hate it.
It was very old school, like 50s monster movie.
It looks like a broccoli monster.
Sci-fi. I thought that it looks like a combination of if a squid fucked one of the big brain aliens from the Star Trek, the original series.
Yeah, it kind of also looks like the Simpsons alien.
Kind of, yeah. I can see that. But it was, I liked the way it was super slimy. You could tell that they only had limited mechanics in it because like the mouths were really moving all over the place and its nose thing was going in and out. And it's like, that's all we could do. At the same time, it has an arm / tail / feeding tube that's attached to it.
Vacuum trunk?
Yeah. Because since it's able to control people's minds, it tries to hypnotize Tony and brings Tony to it and then kills and eats Tony. I actually liked when it was eating Tony, when it like crushed his body when it was sucking it through.
I did enjoy that effect. It was a pretty decent practical effect, actually.
Yeah. At the same time, we're getting Hubbard on his little James Bondian adventure as he's running through. He starts shooting people. He shoots a couple of the eggs that are being incubated so that they'll kill the other guards that are around, because we get more exploding chests. And he ends up taking the female hench lady hostage, and takes her down to the bowels so that he can see what's going on. She ends up getting shot just because the monster, the alien,
the movie's coming to an end and we need her to die.
Because it literally tells Hamilton to kill him, and she's going, "No, you don't have to do what it's telling you. Don't do it. Don't do it." And then he's just like, "I don't care," and shoots her like 3-4 times. Directly after she did that was the funniest moment of the movie, because Hubbard's instinct is to come over and do a really lame karate kick to kick the gun out of Hamilton's hand.
Yeah, doesn't he have a gun of his own?
He does have a gun of his own, and he runs over and he does the poor karate kick and then tries to karate chop him, because we're going for pseudo Roger Moore basically here.
Right. I mean, that's absolutely what this is.
And they're wrestling around on the ground while Stella is being lured to her death by the alien. And of course, Hubbard's able to save the day. He shoots Hamilton, falls to the ground, grabs a flare gun, and shoots the Cyclops in the eye with the flare gun, which somehow causes it to spontaneously catch entirely on fire.
No, but the best part about this is, I don't know if you remember this, but he shoots it in the eye with the flare gun, and we immediately cut to like military soldiers from the country we're in. Like, there's no reaction, there's no, like, the fire comes after we cut back to the scene. Yeah. Like, as soon as the flare gun hits the eye, we immediately cut to another scene, and then we cut back to it.
Yes.
Why?
I don't know. It doesn't matter. We get one more slow motion chest explosion, the biggest one yet, including, I guess, an esophagus deteriorating with Hamilton.
Why does his chest explode? I don't understand this movie.
I don't. There's.
He didn't get any of the goop on him.
There's not. It doesn't. I don't even understand just any of it. Like, even once it's done and they're being rescued by the people, Hubbard grabs a cup of coffee to bring over to Stella, and they have a conversation about what happened on Mars, and he refers to it as the Cyclops star. And she ends up mentioning, anytime I look up at the sky, I'm never going to be able to think of anything about this, and that something out there might be watching us. and then they decide to have the Twilight Zonian type ending where we're given more shots of New York City and see a guy walking past a whole bunch of trash bags that are on the side of the road. And we see a pulsating egg that ends up exploding, and the movie ends on a freeze frame.
Yeah, but that's just going to kill like 2 people that are nearby. That's not like an actual imminent world threat.
Well, I guess they're saying that there's a whole bunch of eggs that end up being put around, and everything's going to end up happening anyways.
I don't know. God, this movie's bad.
It's bad. One thing that I'm interested in, I don't think anybody who has any connections with this company listens to our podcast, but if they do, if anybody even tangentially connected to the Alamo Drafthouse, they need to watch this movie and they need to grab a couple of these exploding chest shots, because they're in ridiculous slow motion, and all I can think of is that they would be perfect for one of the don't talk, don't text ads.
Yeah, that would be good. And the thing is, they're not that bad. Like, the practical effects in this are really, really decent for 1980.
It's the only thing they do well in the film is have people's chest cavities explode in slow motion. But the slow motion makes up for so much of the movie that I guarantee you, if you cut out the majority of the shower scene and you had the exploding chest be in real time, This movie's going to be about 45 minutes.
I think you're right.
I'm not making that as a joke. Anytime they can put slow motion in the movie, that they can. And I don't know if anybody out there is a big fan of Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, but it reminded me of a joke that they said on there, is that when the episodes played, they ended up being about 12 minutes long, but they had to fit the runtime of 22 minutes. So anytime there wasn't any direct action or talking taking place, they'd use slow motion. And even then, they'd sometimes use it a little bit more. And that's how this movie feels. It's just like, oh, we got to do this. We got to use as much of it as we can. The funny thing about the chest bursting is this movie was actually on the infamous Video Nasties list from the UK because of the chest bursting. And it wasn't until 2004 that an almost complete uncut version of the movie was released. And of course, it was actually in the UK that had that first cut. In 2006, Blue Underground put out a completely uncut version of the movie on DVD, and Arrow Video actually, in the last 2 or 3 years, put out a giant, massive Blu-ray that's got, I think it comes with a soundtrack and has 10 different making ofs. It's got 3 or 4 hours of special features on there. So it does have a sizable cult following.
I don't get why. It's it's definitely not so bad it's good to me. It's just a boring movie.
Yeah, it's really boring, but people say that I read somewhere where somebody made the comment that if you understand that the movie's not taking itself seriously, then you'll have more fun with it. But I can't see that because it feels like the movie is trying to be that serious.
Yeah, I think it's taking itself very seriously, and that's the problem. And, I mean, you could argue that a midnight screening when you're a little drunk, surrounded by friends, you might pull some enjoyment out of this film. But other than that, I don't get it. There's a lot of these cult following movies that I do get that I'm like, oh yeah, I can see why people really love this. It's not good, but it's fun and kind of harmless. This is, I don't know. It's just boring. It's people sitting in rooms talking. I mean, for how good the chest bursting effect is, it's not used very often. Mm-hmm. Not too many people actually die in this movie. And it's bad.
How would you fix it?
I don't know, because the biggest problem is it took these things from Alien, right? It took egg, Alien, chest bursting, and it tried to combine them in a way that was a way that they work, but is not identical to Alien. And it just didn't make sense. Because, the only reason the people's chests blow up when they touch the goop is because that's what happened in Alien. So it doesn't make sense. So, I mean, if you're going to fix this movie, don't copy Alien. You could, it's not like Alien was the most original idea in the world. It's an alien monster movie. You can do an alien monster movie. You can do aliens are trying to invade and take over our planet movie with, eggs in it and it not be an alien clone. You can do that. There's lots of movies out there that do that. So don't be afraid to go away from the alien stuff and just make the egg, it's basically Body Snatchers combined with Alien, right? Because at the same time you have these hypnotized people. About, yeah. So, I don't know, stop copying other things. And if you're going to copy something, copy the one thing. Don't try to copy everything.
I completely agree with everything you say. For me, it comes down to a big thing that I've actually been harping on for several different properties recently. And that's lean into the insanity. This movie is made to be an exploitation film, and it does hit lots of those key points that are in the exploitation films. It's just that there's so much dead time. And if you watch lots of exploitation films, they are going to have slow gaps in them, but they combat that by having the movie be about 15 to 20 minutes shorter than this.
Yeah.
And so you can cut it down, but then you can also play up the zany aspect, which they don't do in this case.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if they fully recognized what kind of film they were making and went ham with it, it would be a lot more fun. But none of the actors knew that, because they're all like, you can either have an actor that realizes that they're in a joke movie and like plays the character that way, or you can have a character that realizes that they're in a joke movie and plays it straight to highlight the ridiculousness of it. But they're kind of in the middle. Like, they're just...
I know it's a bad word to use, but like, even if they leaned into, being a little bit sleazier, you can usually get away with that in a movie such as this and play up that aspect. Do you have a ray of sunshine?
Well, first, I'm curious what you think, because we watched a dub, basically, right? So, and the acting performances of the dub were not great. So do you think a lot of this might just be like stuff lost in translation?
I don't think so, because like even though you've got the vocal inflections that you're trying to gauge how things are being played, at the same time reading the body language and looking at the other actors on the screen, you're not getting any energy from them whatsoever. So even if they're speaking in Italian, it's not going to make anything better necessarily.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Even if the story's better, you're still going to have those performances that are lifeless, that are dragging that down.
I think it might have reduced, like, I wonder if they repeated, like, in the scene where they say coffee 5 times, I wonder if in the Italian version they really said coffee 5 times.
Well, you can actually tell at certain points when you've got, like, American actors that are doing it, because you'll see certain words match up correctly.
Mm-hmm.
It's a famous tack that not every single exploitation film did, but there were lots of movies where you would have the nationality of that actor be what they were speaking in the movie. So famously, you had that in like Argento films. You'd have, if somebody was Italian, they're going to be speaking Italian. If somebody's English, they're going to be speaking English, which leads to a whole bunch of weird things. So you've got American dubs of movies where it's matching up with certain actors because they're actually saying their lines in that language, but then it doesn't match up when they've got like the Italian dub where everybody's matched up except for this one person because they're speaking a different language.
Yeah,
but
I see what you're saying.
It speaks to the cheap nature of the process.
Yeah. As far as a ray of sunshine, I don't know. I guess we've already talked about it, but I guess the broccoli monster. I mean, I really liked it.
It's fun. For me, I'm going to say it was an early Goblin score. That was it. It doesn't work the whole time,
and it's very sparingly. Like, most of this movie has no music in it.
Yeah, but when it's there, you're like, oh man, it's Goblin. I love Goblin. If you're a horror nut, you know who Goblin is because they did a shit ton of great movies in the 70s and 80s. My personal favorite being Suspiria, because the Suspiria soundtrack is amazing. That's all I got to say.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's weird how they got them for this movie. It's kind of surprising, but whatever.
Italians. That's how it happens.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, what's your vote, Scott?
Guilty. I mean, this is like, I really, like, I went into this expecting to enjoy it a lot more because anything that is shamelessly trying to crib off Alien is going to be fun in my book. But I had more fun talking about this movie than I did watching it. So yeah, it's guilty. No one should watch this. Like, I legitimately do not understand the cult following aspect of this at all.
I'm going to say guilty as well. It doesn't hold attention enough. It's a movie that you're better off like seeing a couple short clips on YouTube so you can see the chest bursting, but you shouldn't see those moments and then think, oh, this is going to be a great movie. I've got to search it out, because you'll be disappointed. While it does have a fun Goblin score, you can also listen to that online and then purchase that and, help them as opposed to helping the movie. So there's no reason to keep this movie around.
Yep.
And now we don't have to worry about it because it's being launched into the Phantom Zone. So long. Farewell, Contamination. The next movie we're going to do hasn't been decided yet. Vudu has a new crop of movies that they've added on their free with ads. So we might give that a go unless Scott stumbles upon something and says this is what we need to watch. Scott, where can we find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at ScottDaily85. That's DALY. Or my website, Daily Planet Films, where I write film criticism, TV criticism, essays, and also do some other podcasts.
All right. You can find me on Twitter at Adrian Torres. At the same time, you can find writings that I've done at boomhowdy.com. And we are recording this towards the end of April. And I've got a side little project that I'm going to be starting basically on May 1st. So the first episode should come out. I'm going to be doing a short little podcast that's going to be between 30 to 45 minutes long. It's called Horrorversary. And the whole idea behind it is covering horror movies that are hitting major milestones. So 50, 40, 30, 20-year anniversary films. Just taking a look at them. We're going to have lots of different guests on, people who write about horror movies, people who've written horror movies, people who are podcasters concerning horror movies, people who write film criticism in general but have a soft spot for certain horror movies. We're going to cover all that. And our first episode for the 30th year anniversary is going to be Creepshow 2. So take a look on that at May 1st.
I'm very excited to listen to that.
Yeah, I hope it goes well. So
I'm sure it will.
See. Until next time, everybody, you stay safe out there.